Welcome to this deep dive. And today we're going to be exploring this really complex relationship between diabetes and depression. We've got some really fascinating insights that we've pulled from articles on WebMD, the CDC, the Mayo Clinic, even a research paper specifically focusing on this link, and a piece exploring the psychological impacts that both conditions can have on people. So before we get started, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Visions Beyond. Okay, so get this. People with diabetes are 2 to 3 times more likely to experience depression. That's a huge jump.
Yeah.
And it really makes you wonder, is it just the stress of managing a chronic illness, or is there something deeper going on?
Yeah, it's definitely more than just everyday stress. You really have to consider the psychological blow that can come with the diabetes diagnosis. It can be a very overwhelming experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. The WebMD article talks about people feeling shocked, sad, and even like losing hope after receiving a diagnosis. And you're suddenly faced with this chronic condition that requires constant attention. It's a lot to process.
Absolutely. And the CDC source actually emphasizes how this feeling often develops into something called diabetes distress. It's the sense of being completely burdened and defeated by the demands of managing diabetes. So it goes beyond just typical stress, and it can really impact how well someone manages their condition.
So it's like the diagnosis itself contributes to this feeling of being overwhelmed. And then on top of that, you have all these lifestyle changes that are necessary for managing diabetes. The CDC article mentions strict diets, exercise routines, constant blood sugar monitoring. I mean, that sounds stressful in itself.
Oh yeah, definitely. It adds like another layer of complexity. And just think about it. These lifestyle changes are already difficult for anyone. But when you're also dealing with the emotional weight of a new diagnosis and potentially even diabetes distress, it can feel incredibly daunting.
Yeah, and the Mayo Clinic article pointed out something I hadn't even considered. The physical symptoms of fluctuating blood sugar can actually mimic the symptoms of depression. So you might be experiencing fatigue or irritability or difficulty concentrating, and you don't even know if it's from your blood sugar or from depression.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It kind of creates this confusing situation where it's hard to pinpoint the root cause of how you're feeling. And it just highlights just how intricate the connection between these two conditions are, even on a physical level.
Right, so we've got the emotional burden of the diagnosis, the stress of lifestyle changes, and now this overlap in physical symptoms. It's no wonder that this link between diabetes and depression is so strong. But is there something more happening on like a biological level? Is there an actual connection in the brain?
Yeah, this is where the research gets really interesting. There's a growing body of evidence that points to a physiological connection specifically related to chronic stress. And remember how we talked about how a diabetes diagnosis can be so overwhelming? Well, that constant stress basically triggers the release of hormones like cortisol, and over time, prolonged exposure to cortisol can actually negatively impact the brain.
Okay, so the stress hormones are essentially messing with the brain.
Exactly. And one particular area of the brain that seems particularly vulnerable is the hippocampus.
The hippocampus, that rings a bell.
Yeah.
Isn't that the part of the brain involved with memory?
Yes, it's crucial for learning and memory, but it also plays a significant role in regulating emotions. And studies have shown that both diabetes and depression are actually linked to structural changes in the hippocampus.
Wow, so you're saying that diabetes, or rather the chronic stress that often comes with it, can actually change the physical structure of your brain in a way that makes you more susceptible to depression.
That's what the research is suggesting. And to add to that, our research paper highlights a particularly concerning finding. Poorly managed diabetes, especially in younger individuals, is linked to even higher rates of depression.
That's alarming. It really underscores how crucial it is to manage diabetes effectively, not just for physical health, but for mental well-being too. It makes you wonder if there's sort of like a domino effect happening where diabetes is making you vulnerable to depression, which then makes it even harder to manage the diabetes.
Unfortunately, that's often the case. When you're dealing with depression, your motivation plummets, your energy levels plummet. It becomes so difficult to stick to those healthy habits that are so important for managing diabetes. Things like maintaining a healthy diet, exercising regularly, even just remembering to take your medication.
And as if that weren't enough, the Mayo Clinic article explains that the emotional turmoil of depression can actually throw blood sugar levels out of whack, leading to even more physical symptoms.
Exactly. It's like a vicious cycle. You're essentially caught in this loop where each condition just exacerbates the other.
It's like a double whammy. Diabetes increasing your risk for depression, which then makes the diabetes even harder to manage. And it's crucial to recognize that this isn't just feeling a little down. Depression is a serious medical condition, and it's not something you should just try to power through. Our sources list all sorts of symptoms: fatigue, Sleep disturbances, trouble concentrating, feelings of hopelessness,
No.
worthlessness. The list goes on.
And if any of those symptoms resonate with you, seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength, and it's the best way to break free from this cycle.
Absolutely. It's not about toughing it out. It's about taking care of yourself.
Right.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about how to break this cycle. What can people do to effectively manage both diabetes and depression?
Well, one approach that's showing a lot of promise is something called collaborative care. It involves building a team of medical professionals to kind of create this comprehensive treatment plan. So doctors, nurses, therapists, dietitians, all working together to address both the physical and mental aspects of these conditions.
So it's not just about treating each condition in isolation. It's about recognizing that they're intertwined and require more of like a holistic approach.
Exactly. Because trying to manage these two conditions separately can be so overwhelming. Having that team that understands that complex interplay between them can really be a game changer.
And in addition to that team approach, our sources also mention therapy, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Can you explain what that is and how it helps?
Yeah, CBT is a type of talk therapy that focuses on identifying and challenging negative thought patterns and developing healthy coping mechanisms for stress. It's not about forcing positive thinking. It's much about recognizing unhelpful thought patterns and learning how to reframe them in a more constructive way.
So it's about becoming aware of how your thoughts influence your feelings and behaviors, especially when it comes to managing a chronic condition like diabetes.
Right. And CBT has been incredibly effective in treating both depression and anxiety, which are often present alongside diabetes. So it can equip you with the tools to better manage the emotional and mental challenges that come with both conditions.
That makes sense. And what about medication? I know there are medications for both diabetes and depression. Do those play a role in this collaborative approach?
Absolutely. Medication can be a critical part of the treatment plan, especially when dealing with the biological aspects of these conditions. And in some cases, certain antidepressants like SSRIs have even been shown to help regulate blood sugar levels in people with type 2 diabetes.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it's not just about treating the symptoms separately. There's a potential for some medications to address both conditions simultaneously.
Exactly. And it highlights how interconnected our bodily systems truly are. What impacts our mental health can have a direct effect on our physical health and vice versa.
This is all incredibly insightful. And while we're only scratching the surface here, we've covered a lot of ground. The emotional weight of a diagnosis, the stress of lifestyle changes, the physiological link in the brain, and even the importance of a collaborative approach to treatment. It's clear that diabetes and depression are far more intertwined than many people realize.
Yeah, it's a connection that deserves a lot more attention, especially given how prevalent both conditions are.
Right. And as we wrap up part one of this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. We've talked about how both diabetes and depression involve inflammation. Could addressing that inflammation be a key to improving both physical and mental well-being? We'll delve into that and more in part two of our deep dives. Stay tuned. That's a really intriguing question if inflammation plays a role in both. Could tackling that be the key to feeling better overall?
That's the hope. And there's a growing body of research that's exploring this very connection. For example, some studies are looking into how anti-inflammatory diets could help manage both conditions.
So you're talking about like loading up on those antioxidant-rich foods, berries, leafy greens, things like that.
Exactly. Those types of foods are packed with nutrients that can help fight inflammation throughout your body. But it's not just about diet stress management. Techniques like mindfulness and meditation have also been shown to have anti-inflammatory effects.
That's amazing. It seems counterintuitive that something as simple as like taking a few deep breaths could have an impact on your physical health.
It really shows how powerful the mind-body connection is. We're not just a bunch of separate parts, Your thoughts, emotions, and physical health are all interconnected.
Okay, so we're starting to see like a glimmer of hope here. But let's be real for a second. Managing both diabetes and depression can be incredibly tough. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling totally overwhelmed by it all?
First and foremost, remember, you are not alone in this. Millions of people are facing these same challenges, and there's absolutely no shame in struggling. It's important to remember that mental health is just as important as physical health, and asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
I think that's a message we need to hear more often. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of toughing it out, but sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach out for support.
I couldn't agree more. And speaking of support, I would also encourage people to focus on small, achievable goals rather than trying to change their entire life overnight. Maybe start by incorporating one or two healthy habits into your routine.
So instead of getting overwhelmed by the big picture, just focus on taking small steps.
Exactly. Small changes can make a huge difference over time, and as you start to see progress, it can boost your motivation to keep going.
It's like that snowball effect.
Yeah.
You start with a small snowball, but as you roll it down a hill, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to ask for support along the way, whether it's from friends, family, or a support group. Having people you can lean on can make a world of difference. We're social creatures by nature, and we thrive on that connection.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, this deep connection between diabetes and depression, and some hopeful approaches to managing both. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what stands out to you the most?
For me, it's the reminder that you can't just treat one condition in isolation. We need to consider the whole person, their physical health, mental health, lifestyle, support system. Everything is connected.
That holistic approach seems so crucial. It's about seeing the bigger picture and understanding how all these different aspects of our lives influence each other.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that research is constantly evolving. There's still so much we're learning about the interplay between diabetes and depression.
Which means there's hope for new and even better treatments down the road.
Exactly. That's the exciting part. There's always more to discover.
Well, on that hopeful note, we're going to wrap up part 2 of our deep dives. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll delve into some cutting-edge research and explore innovative approaches to managing both conditions. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into this fascinating connection between diabetes and depression. We've explored the emotional and physiological links, and now I'm really excited to kind of dive into some of that groundbreaking research that's shaping the future of treatment for both conditions.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to see the progress being made in this area. One particularly interesting avenue of research focuses on the gut microbiome. You know, those trillions of bacteria that live in your digestive system.
Okay, I've heard a bit about the gut microbiome, but I honestly never would have guessed that it could be connected to both diabetes and depression. What's the link there?
Well, it's a relatively new field of study, but researchers are starting to uncover some really fascinating connections. For instance, studies have found that people with diabetes tend to have a less diverse gut microbiome compared to those without the condition.
So there's less variety in the types of bacteria living in their gut. So what does that have to do with diabetes?
Well, some researchers believe this lack of diversity could actually contribute to inflammation and insulin resistance, both of which are key factors in the development of diabetes.
Okay, that's interesting. But how does depression fit into this picture?
Yeah, so here's where things get really fascinating. The gut microbiome can also influence the production of certain neurotransmitters in your brain, like serotonin, and serotonin plays a crucial role in regulating your mood.
So you're saying that if the balance of bacteria in your gut is off, it could potentially affect your mental health as well.
That's the emerging theory. It's a complex interplay, but the research is starting to reveal these really intriguing connections between the gut, the brain, and these two seemingly separate conditions.
This is all pretty mind-blowing. So what are the practical implications of this research? Are we talking about like fecal transplants for diabetes and depression?
Not quite yet, but researchers are definitely exploring ways to manipulate the gut microbiome to improve both physical and mental health, for example. They're looking at the potential of probiotics and prebiotics, which can help promote a healthier balance of bacteria in the gut. Fecal microbiota transplantation is also being studied as a potential therapeutic option, though it's still in the very early stages of research.
Wow, so the future of medicine could be pretty gutsy. It sounds like we're on the verge of some major breakthroughs in how we understand and treat both diabetes and depression.
I agree. Another exciting area of research involves personalized medicine, the idea of tailoring treatments to an individual's unique genetic makeup and lifestyle.
Oh yeah, I've heard a little bit about personalized medicine. It seems like it could totally revolutionize healthcare. But how does it apply specifically to diabetes and depression?
Well, remember how we talked about how complex both of these conditions are? There's so many different factors that contribute to their development and progression. So a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah, it makes sense that you would need a more tailored approach, especially given that unique interplay between these two conditions.
Exactly. With personalized medicine, the goal is to develop treatments that are more targeted and effective based on an individual's specific needs and characteristics.
Okay, so how close are we to actually making personalized medicine a reality? It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
We're still in those early stages, but the rapid advancements in genetic testing and data analysis are really propelling this field forward. Researchers are already identifying genetic markers that could predict an individual's risk of developing diabetes or depression, and this information could be incredibly valuable in guiding treatment decisions.
That's incredible. It almost sounds like having a crystal ball that can tell you what's in store for your health.
It's not magic, but
Yeah.
it's pretty close. And as this research progresses, we can expect to see even more personalized and effective approaches to managing both diabetes and depression.
Well, this entire deep dive has been just an incredible journey. We started by understanding this basic connection between diabetes and depression
Yeah.
and ended up exploring like the frontiers of scientific research. It's amazing to see how much progress is being made, and it just gives me hope for the future.
Yeah, I share your optimism. For me, the biggest takeaway from this whole exploration is that reaffirmation that the mind and body are just inextricably linked. What affects one affects the other.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And as we wrap up this final part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. Given what we've learned about the gut microbiome's connection to both diabetes and depression, could something as simple as changing your diet have a profound impact on your overall well-being, both physically and mentally? It's definitely something to consider as we kind of navigate the complexities of these conditions.
That's an excellent point, and it underscores the importance of taking a holistic approach to our health. Recognizing that our physical and mental well-being are very intricately intertwined.
Thank you for joining us on this fascinating exploration of the link between diabetes and depression. We hope this deep dive has equipped you with some valuable insights and a sense of hope for the future. And remember, you're not alone in this journey, and there's always help available.
Take care, everyone.